So when we talk about glial cells, we have two main categories, the microglia cells and the macroglia cells. The macroglia cells are actually divided into 5 different sections, whereas in the microglia, we simply just have microglia. Now, before taking a deep dive into each of these different types of cells, just to give a quick overview and a quick glance, we can see that in the central nervous system, we have the ependymal cells, the oligodendrocytes, astrocytes, and microglia, whereas in the peripheral nervous system, we have satellite cells and Schwann cells. And the way that I remember which type of cells are found in which nervous system is that I simply remember that in the peripheral nervous system, we have satellite cells and Schwann cells, and then everything else is in the central nervous system. So I just remember these two to for sure be in the peripheral, and that way I know that everything else is going to be in the central. Hopefully some of you may find that useful. But taking a look at, first of all, the microglia cells. The microglia cells, remember, are found in the central nervous system, and they are essentially macrophages that are able to undergo phagocytosis, which means they essentially are able to pick up or digest whatever is in the surroundings. And since they are able to act as phagocytes, that makes them the defenders of the central nervous system. So essentially they act as immune cells. So for example, if there's a pathogen in our central nervous system, the microglia will come towards the pathogen and can eat it up, or in scientific terms we say phagocytosis. So essentially, it'll just digest that pathogen. So microglia are the immune cells of the central nervous system, or you can remember them as the defenders against pathogens. Next up, we have the oligodendrocytes, which make up the myelin sheath in the central nervous system. So if we remember back to the components of a neuron, remember that in a neuron, we have the cell body, we have the axon hillock, and then we have the axon. So the axon is surrounded by these blanket coats, and those blanket coats are known as the myelin sheaths, which serve to insulate and prevent the leaking of ions in the axon. So that myelin sheath is made up of oligodendrocyte cells in the central nervous system. So in the central nervous system, that myelin sheath is made up of oligodendrocytes. That will not be the same in the peripheral nervous system. Right now we're talking about the central nervous system, and here we see the oligodendrocytes. Now, what's also interesting to note is that a single oligodendrocyte can myelinate several neurons. So over here we can see this is essentially where the oligodendrocyte is found, and it is propagating over here and is able to myelinate several neurons, not just one, but several. So in comparison, we have the Schwann cells, and the Schwann cells also form the myelin sheath, but they form the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. And also conversely to the oligodendrocyte, the Schwann cells, a single Schwann cell can only myelinate one neuron. So over here we can see the single Schwann cell myelinating a single neuron. Now, just to recap quickly again, remember that the myelin sheath is found on the axon of the neuron, and it serves to insulate the axon. Now the myelin sheath, it is either made up of Schwann cells or oligodendrocytes. Oligodendrocytes are used in the central nervous system, but the Schwann cells are used in the peripheral nervous system. Now next up, we have the astrocytes. So these astrocytes kind of look like stars, and they're found in the central nervous system. And they have two main functions. They maintain that blood-brain barrier in our central nervous system. So remember, our central nervous system, it consists of our brain. So it makes sense that the astrocytes' function is to maintain that blood-brain barrier. And it also ensures the maintenance of mineral and nutrient balance of our central nervous system. Last but not least, we have the ependymal cells, which are located in the brain, and their goal is to circulate the cerebrospinal fluid through their hair-like projections. So we can see over here we have our ependymal cells, and they have these little cilia, hair-like projections, and these hair-like projections are able to circulate that fluid, and circulating that fluid is essential. And that's the ependymal cells. So we can remember that ependymal cells are found in the central nervous system because they are involved with the brain, and remember that the brain is a component of the central nervous system, not the peripheral nervous system. Now, in comparison to the astrocytes, Now we have satellite cells. Remember, the astrocytes are essentially the support cells of the central nervous system, whereas satellite cells are the support cells in the peripheral nervous system. So if we really take a close look at these types of glial cells, they're easy to understand because when we have these different types, one of the types is found in the central nervous system, whereas the other type is found in the peripheral nervous system. So it's not too complex to understand. So once again, the astrocytes, they were the support cells of the central nervous system, but these satellite cells are the support cells of the peripheral nervous system, and they support the ganglia. And just so you know, the ganglia is essentially a group of neural cell bodies. So it's just a bunch of neural cell bodies that cluster together. So over here we can see a satellite cell. It has this bulb shape, and its function is just support in the peripheral nervous system. So I bring you back to this slide once again to summarize everything that we have learned. Remember that microglia and macroglia are like the two sections of glial cells, but macroglia can be subdivided into 5 different types of cells, whereas microglia, we simply have microglia. Now remember that these 4 cells are found in the central nervous system. Ependymal cells circulate that cerebrospinal fluid. Oligodendrocytes form the myelin sheath. The astrocytes serve as the support cells of the central nervous system. They keep that blood-brain barrier. They maintain that mineral balance. Next up, we have the microglia. Microglia are essentially the immune cells of the nervous system. They are macrophages that are able to digest or consume these pathogens via phagocytosis. And then we have the peripheral nervous system, which consists of satellite cells, which are just the support cells of the peripheral nervous system. And then we have the Schwann cells, which form the myelin sheath on the axon in the peripheral nervous system. And that's essentially all we need to know about the glial cells. It's not too complex, pretty straightforward.